With that, Olivier, please, next slide. All right, we're actually in next door offices. All right. First of all, I wouldn't be complete with just giving a little background. I assume most of you, if you signed up for this webinar, you know what Figma is, but just to be clear, it's a really great way to prototype what your interface will not just look like, but how it will interact. So you can actually, sort of have clicks, expansions, and all that kind of good stuff. It's cloud-based. It is a prototyping tool. It doesn't write code for you. There's a separate step of design and prototype and collaboration with development. Olivier, if you can go to the next screen. So I really want to emphasize the collaboration part because yes, it's if you haven't experienced Figma, it's very easy. I've even done this to just point to the design component. You're setting up what your user interface is going to look like, how it's going to behave, and all that. But because it's collaborative, you can really have a good input relationship between different teams. So you might have your design and development teams, and they might work really closely together. And the purpose here is that what you get is an application that's more pleasing to use. Instead of a clear handoff, like we're going to design this without the developer input, we get the developer input on the design. There's clear understanding of features between product management and the like. And what the developers get is a really good guide for what to build in their product or feature that they're working on right now. Because of that collaboration, that's the opportunity. And we're going to show the opportunity for localization to have a seat at that table in a collaborative experience. And Olivier is going to show you that with a few slides, as well as some hands-on actually doing the work. So Olivier, I think the next slide is yours. You take it away. Oh, this was me, actually. But you can take it if you want. All right, I'll just take this one. So this is a bit of a repeat, but the idea is that localization is added to the UI user experience consideration. The localization team can be part of this collaboration, and translations can actually be leveraged later during production. So you can get a head start on translations as well. We'll show all of those. Obviously, one of the very first things is looking at sizing for the translation, and you may want to have really immediate feedback during that process. Go ahead, Olivier, take from here.
Thanks, Adam. So before going to Figma and localization, I want to introduce Localyzer. And this is Localyzer, as Adam mentioned, developed using Figma, actually, in terms of the UI. And what you're seeing here is a project that's a typical Localizer project, meaning not for Figma specifically. And it goes against a repository that's called Lingoport Public Rebel Outfitters. It has ENUS as the base locale, has a number of target locales that are actually right here with their completion for each one of them, the status of the translation for the source strings that are in ENUS, and how they have been translated thus far. Having added FRCA, you see that they have been sent for translation, and you see actually right below here the outstanding translation kits. So typically, you will control things to be sent for translation from Localyzer. I wanted to introduce that before the Figma integration, simply because the Figma is an add-on to our system. So very typically, the first flow of data go from a repository that holds source data, but also other artifacts from development. So you'll have C#, you'll have Java code, you'll also have properties files, regex, and other resource files. They are going to be written typically in ENUS or in English in the source locale. Here it's the ENUS. It's going to be pulled down on a localizer system, analyzed for correctness, and that's really important. If things are not correct, then it will be indicated as to why they're not correct, when it's to be corrected. It will have a status, as we just saw earlier. And if everything is fine, then somebody will decide to send things to be sent for translation. It may be somebody on the development side, it may be a localization manager, it may be just a normal dev manager who says, okay, I need to have that for my sprint. I'm going to send that to be translated to an LSP or to a machine translation or to a TMS, however that's configured on the localizer side. It will be translated into those locales based on the configuration in the localizer side. When that's done, it's going to be returned, checked again for correctness. That's really important, with notification indicating for the folks who are interested in terms of things that have been correctly moved back from the LSP to localizer, and then pushed to the repository if and only if all the checks are passing, if you will. So in that diagram, that's the traditional localizer diagram. We're adding Figma, and what that says is that a localizer project will now be able to interact with Figma. So in Figma, it will point to a localizer instance or a localizer project that has everything already set up. So who is the LSP, how the transition is going to be done, what kind of checks you will want, what are the locales that are set up. And so from Figma, you're going to say, I want to interact with this project to have my translation sent to, again, different way of onboarding for the localizer project. That means that Figma, in terms of the localization, is benefiting from everything that we already have built over years of development here and the interactions with different systems. In terms of Figma, you'll find the plugin from Figma from this UDA over there next to the hand. You're going to put Lingoport in terms of the search box. It's going to find Lingoport Localizer. That's a plugin. And at that point, you can point Localizer, that plugin, over to the command center and say, I want to use that project. That's pretty much it. So now we're going to have a short demo. It's not going to be very long, just to show a little bit how things are going. So first here, we have a project that's called Lingoport Figma Webinar. And you see that it has EN as the source locale. It has French, Japanese, and Russian as the target locales. It's using, in this instance, something so that things are going faster, an MT, an AWS machine translation system. And a few things have been selected and sent from Figma over here. And you see that everything is 100% translated. How does that relate to Figma? So we're going to go to Figma now. It's right here. And in Figma, this project here, if I go and search for Lingoport, you'll find the Lingoport localizer. And to set it up, you're going to point it to that command center instance with a user token kind of thing, and pick the project that you're interested in. So the one that you want is Lingoport Figma Webinar in this instance. So that's where things are going to be translated. And because of that, there is the base locale and the target locales are set up as per the configuration in Localizer. So it makes it really easy to get things going from Figma at that point. Here, we already have selected a number of things to be translated and some that are not translated. So I just want to show you photo, register, and so on. Those have been sent for translation if you want. And then we are creating new interfaces with search and so on that have not been sent for translation yet. So what does that look like in terms of when we want to show the items that were sent for translation? We click here and we pick the target locale. So maybe the first one is very simply EO, and that you may want to do that if you're going with on the localizer side, a TMS or an LSP that has human translation and takes a little bit of time, but you want your designers to get a sense right away. That's kind of a possible way that you want to do that. And so you just click EO, for example, confirm translate, and you're going to see that there is a new page that is the same as prototyping in Figma. It's for EO. And maybe you want to see if things were returned for those locales, maybe you want to check Russian, for example. So you can add this one and it's going to add another page there. So let's have a look at those pages. I'm going to click here for Figma. I'm going to move it back to 100% here. Here we go. And at that point, I should have the things that were previously selected be sent for translation to pseudo-localization. So you see browse all, for example, you see discover, and discover already here. We're seeing that maybe some locales may have some issues with that particular string size, the font size, and so on. So just a very, very quick check independently of the locale could be done right here. So without having an LSP sending the translations right away, you could use that really quickly. Now, if you have empty or if you have something where the return locales were done for Russian, for example, then you can double click here. Same thing, I'm going to move it to 100% here. And at that point, I will see actual translations. Photo is over here, and you see Russian here that I do not read. One of the things you see right away is that on this interface, it's starting to go outside of the bounds of the UI. And same with this one right here, discover, see again, or something here in Russian. That is looking that way. You may want to see, you know, the locales in French or something else as per what was configured in Localizer, and you'll be able to do that again. I'm going to remove those, delete that page and this one here. And now I'm going to go with those that are this one here. Those that have not been sent for translation yet. So how, if the designer has not created those two search items here, how would I send that for translation? What I would do is I would click again Localizer, and this time I'm going to just select those items to be sent for translation, and I just want those. And what you're seeing is as I select stuff here, you're going to see that the strings to be sent for translations are selected on the Localizer interface here. So I'm going to go like this, for example, and then I can verify which one of those I want to send for translation. Search, yeah, 927, I don't really care, so I'm going to eliminate it from here. So all results, 927 again, I don't care. So here I'm just going to send those selected strings. I review, yes, there are 6 strings for that project, that's what I want. I'm going to export to Command Center. So at that point, those strings that were selected from Figma happen to be sent for Command Center. And when the analysis in Command Center is going to happen, like this button here is showing that analysis is being carried out. And you can see that also in the queue here, but you can see that over there. You can check the logs or something. You're going to have a reflection at the end of the analysis of how many strings need to be translated if you want, or what is the completion report, what is the status of the translation for things that were sent from Figma to Localizer. So at this stage, you're going to be able to see that for, well, this is, I think my Zoom is going in between. For French, Japanese, and Russian now, I have 10 more strings to be translated. And so again, if you have a TMS or if you have an LSP, or it's going to be human translated, here it's purely machine translation. So I want to send the key to translation. You see that it is being machine translated at the top there. You see that it's in the queue, it's running now. You see that this is happening, and it's not going to take very long because it's a few words with AWS MT, so it's going to come back very quickly. We're already done with the translation, by the way, and now we're going through the analysis of the files that were returned to update this interface here. So at the end of this update, we are going to see that everything that was sent from Figma to be translated by Localizer is going to be 100%. So right now, really quickly here. And so one thing that we're going to do also after this is we're going to add a locale. So you see that pseudo localized done, and you'll see the report. It's 100%. You see everything is now 100% for the locales, the target locales that are of interest. So pretty much at that point, and people will get a notification indicating that those have been complete if you want. So it's an email notification that is being sent to a set of recipients configured in Localizer. And at that point, close this guy here. Let's say that I'm coming back to my interface from Figma. I'm again running my Lingoport. This guy, and I want to say translate for the last thing that I did for in French this time. Let's say I'm going to confirm the translation. And at that point, you see the Figma slide over there. I'm going to click here. Remove that guy because it's in the middle. And this is here. I'm going to make that to 50%. And show where we had before search. You see rechercher. I'm going to make it all bigger. Percent. Rechercher, les chiens, tous les résultats. Voir plus. This one was not sent for translation, if you remember. So that's how fast it can be, but also it will depend again on the way the LSP is set up or the translation is set up, configured in Localizer. So if I wanted to have more locales here right now, if you remember, we have that set. The set of locales here is going to be, I don't want this guy, I want this guy here. There we go. So the set of locales are those locales. Let's say that I want to add Korean now. So that means that in Localizer, I need to configure that. So let's go over there. I'm going to say I want to add Korean. I'm going to go to the Localizer settings, just here, and say add Korean. So just like this. There we go with Korean. Done, it's done. I'm going to save it. And so at that point, I need to, it's going to update the settings, and it's going to update the report so that the completion report will now indicate that Korean, well, it's not translated yet. So at that point, it will indicate 0% for Korean. The rest is going to stay at 100%. And when we go to Figma at that point, I'm going to close this guy. The interface zoom is in the middle again. Okay, here we go. So I go over there and I'm going to say, okay, what are the locales? Now I have Korean. So it's not translated yet. So if I were to say Korean, it will be in English, right? But again, because we have machine translation here, we can go pretty quickly. So you see that in Korean here, it's 0%. It's great. You can see that right away. Here it shows the fact that some were translated and some need to be sent for translation. So I'm going to click that button again. So same thing as before, right? Should feel pretty familiar now. And this is going to be sent for translation. You're going to see the top here. Things are running for the translation. And so when it's back, it's gonna be able to send. Here it's running on this one here. You can check the log if you want to. Like if you were to click here, you'd see exactly what's happening in terms of every one of the steps that are being taken by Localizer in order to generate reports and what kind of files and so on. So there are ways to double check if you want, if you want to see exactly what's happening. You see that it's now 100% here for this one here. So Korean now has been back. And if I go back again, notifications are going to be sent to the recipients that are configured in Localizer. If I go back here, I'm going to say, let's check Korean, for example, confirm the translation. Here we go. Korean is back. So I'm going to close this guy. Here we go. Korean. And at that point, I'm going to move back to, again, 50% something here. And so at that point, I have the Korean for photos and so registered, etc. So that's about it for the demo. I'm going to stop the demo now, and I'm going to go back to the slides. I find the slides again. Here we go. So we just did a demo. You saw pseudo localization. So the nice thing about it is that it's independent of the locale. So you could just have a project in Localizer that's just purely Pseudoloc. Maybe it's just for the designers at this point. It's not really a localization moving up the ladder, but your designers want to know where the layout, the issues are, maybe in layout truncation and so on. Machine translation, as you can see, was really fast. It's an immediate translation. Again, the UI layout, you also have the locales that you may be interested in. So maybe you have the figs, or maybe you have CJK. that you're more interested in, and it's going to CJK typically it's going to be tight. So it might be if that's what your focus is, that may be more interesting for you. Also, MT can be trained with glossary, dictionaries, training. You know, there's a lot of things that are happening in this world today. Of course, human translation is the typical workflow with review, with everything that you need in order for things to be more precise. And so that may be the way that people will want to go, especially if there is a type of SLA around Figma type designs where things are coming back faster than for other priorities, for example. Thing here that we wanted to emphasize is really the collaboration between designing in the UI UX type of thing around Figma and development, where you actually write code, you deploy an application, you have the typical QA testing, you write JUnits and so on. The thing here is that when you think about an application, the UI is a really important part of it. And the UI, designing something without development involved is going to have a strong friction at some point. So in terms of an organization and a way to work together, there will be changes. And if you are not using Figma and you're introducing Figma, you're going to introduce changes in the way that the interactions are going to be. Here, what we wanted to show is really the fact that localization can be moved up the ladder really early, even before development starts. And so you may have a trained MT, you may revise some of the glossaries based on what you're seeing on the screen from that side, or how translation memory is being used for different projects in the domain. And so in the domain for medical analysis or something, or physics or some other things, you may have very specific terms that you want to set up very early, as soon as the design, in order to have later on down the line, leveraging that translation memory for developers who are not writing Figma type of files. Developer writes resource files like regex properties, JSON, YAML, PO, you know those type of resource files that are the typical things, or special resource files like what we experience a lot with some of our clients that we handle. But then you'll be able to leverage what was done before if you have something around transition memory. So you may really move the localization team as part not only of Figma and development, but also add that aspect of language really early together with the other part. So you're going to actually move localization, highlight its importance in a great way, right together with designers and developers. That's really the key I wanted to highlight there. That's it for my presentation. Opening up for questions. It's a short webinar today.
All right. Thanks, O. That was really good. I personally enjoyed that as well. I actually love watching you demo. All right. We've got some questions started already. I'm going to kind of take them in order, and by all means, please jump in and use the Q&A interface, and we'll go from there. We only have a few minutes, but if there are further questions, we tend to stay on a little longer to take care of them. So don't worry about if you're worried about we're going to run out of time. And if we do finally run out of time, we'll email you with answers. All right, so first question. Is there a list of TMS's cat tools that the Localizer plugin is compatible with? Yeah, it's on our wiki. So if you go to wiki.lingoport.com, but I'll just kind of spit them off. It's really most TMSs out there. But there are some rare exceptions. We have sort of like both, with some we have true API connections, others we have via file exchange that's a little bit more straightforward. Honestly, even just the simple file exchange works quite well. But some of those I'll just name off are XTM, pretty much anything RWS we have a connection to. So that's Stratos Enterprise and various other legacy products of theirs like World Server. Lingotech, MemSource, I know they're phrase these days, but we do connect to them. MemoQ. The list is longer than that, but those are the ones off the top of my head where I'm not having a brain cloud. There's also a lot of flexibility to various vendor portals. So in many cases, customers are actually using like a TMS that's hosted by a localization vendor. And so, some examples of that, but not the complete list, is like we have a really good connection relationship with Translated and all the very cool things they're doing with sort of tailored machine translation and the like, and they've been adding a lot of AI to that. Vistatech, Accolade, that's another list that's long, even like some smaller companies like Language Scientific and the like. We like them very much. All right, I think I've kind of killed that question, but if you have a question about a particular TMS that you're using, just fire an email if I missed it. All right, how is this different than the Figma connectors that the TMS providers offer? That's a zinger. All right, so I would say at its very base, like connecting to a Figma, yeah, a lot of people have that. What you get out of Localizer is a tremendous amount of repo-focused flexibility. You get like, there's something like 45 checks, I might have that number off by 1 or 2, that happen to files as they go in and out. You get tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of what is connected to, immediate results out of that. Nobody has to remember to push a button to make a translation happen. You also get a lot of future proofing. So what we've seen is, because we're focused on software, the range of features that we provide is just a broader range than any like Git connector out there. Those features become really important in terms of not propagating something like an ICU bug or a mistake with a string parameter that we see. So it's not like just any one thing. It's really the whole package of notifications, integration with messaging tools, and all this very like broad enterprise and flexible capabilities that ends up saving a lot of time. All right, I'm going to move on. Our inline formatting changes, tag marked up in the file, exported for translation, bold, italic, size, color changes, etc. Olivier, I'll let you take that.
So what we're getting from Figma is really the text side of things, and we push it back in the same text node. If you've noticed, the size, for example, of some of the titles was the same in Russian as it was in English. The font was the same in this as it was there. I don't know if you've noticed that during the demo, but it kept the information from the English page, and because it's really at the bottom of the hierarchy, it's purely the text that we send. So typically that information is at above that, if that makes sense to you guys. But you should have seen that in the demo.
All right, good. All right, please explain more on your last slide on challenges on moving the translated file back to the repository. I'll let you go ahead with that too, Olivier.
Yeah, what I wanted to emphasize is that, as Adam mentioned earlier, Figma is not a development tool. You don't create code out of Figma. What you do is you prototype an application or a website or something else. You prototype. And so what will happen is, when you develop software developers are not going to want to be constrained by any ways that those Figma files are transferred from Figma to Localizer, or Localizer to a machine translation engine or something. They will do their own way of creating files. So in Figma, you have a hierarchy of information that is rendered in a certain way. In in an application, you'll have resource files that have a key value pair that is really specific, that is referenced in the code. You say, show me the label with that code in English. Show me the label with that code in French. And so that code is not going to transfer directly from Figma over to a regex, for example. A regex file has a very specific format that Figma knows nothing about. And so what I was trying to show there is that as you are either training or setting up a glossary or a transition memory or something, you will still be able to leverage the transitions that were done much earlier if the developers respect the same strings for that type of a domain when they send it to a TMS or an MT or something else, where the glossaries indicate or the transition memory indicates what was the transition before for the design. It's still there for a regex, which is a completely different beast than what's happening in Figma.
All right. We got some really nice praise. I'm not going to read it aloud because we're short of time, but appreciate that. That's always lovely. All right. Would you ever see this as potential replacement for in-app testing to front load that element of the process as well? No. Again, you still need to test because there's a difference between what you've prototyped and what the team actually develops. Olivier, if you have anything to add on that, chime in, but I'm just going to go to the next question.
I know, that's exactly right. And plus, as there is going to be a drift in between the design and development. It may not be a strong drift, or depending on the teams, right? And so something that was designed with something in mind may transmute into something slightly different. So you will want to have a QA side, like Adam was saying.
Right.
Plus, it's not because you have resource files. Sometimes you still have embedded strings in the code that developers don't realize they have put in the code. Again, Figma and development are very different worlds. And so there may be even ITN issues that developers have created from a Figma-based design that are still there. So you do want to have QA now.
Right. And just to toot our own horn, our globalizer software would help developers as they work to see any I18N issues that they may have created, or internationalization issues. So if they do something like forget to pass locale into a method, or concatenate a string in a way that's going to mess you up on the translator side, we'll find that and point the developer at it during their workflow. So it's very quick and easy to fix. As well as Localizer will do things like find if like a file is missing a curly bracket, or the string parameters were not properly handled by the translator, and so when they're returned, it breaks the string. Those are the kinds of things that our products will all find as they use. It's just like when you saw analysis, when Olivier was pushing buttons, one of the things you were waiting for, that's the analysis of what's being, the files that's being done. All right. Are string IDs present in extraction for translation? No, not in Figma. Yes, if let's say you're actually developing and you've got JSON, regex, properties, any number of PO files, whatever, those are most definitely tracked. And additionally, if that's messed up, like there's a missing string ID or there's a duplicate string ID, that will be found. All right, if strings in Figma is changed while there is an active job containing the changed strings in Lingoport, will Lingoport detect the changed
Yes.
string? Thank you. Yes, quick answer. That also happens with all other file types too. It's always like nobody has to push a button, and that's cool. All right. I think we're good. We ran a little over with Q&A, but I'm always happy to do that. Thank you. Attendance was great here for this webinar. Appreciate you all joining us on August, and I hope you're getting this last little vacation in for your summer if you've got that opportunity, and enjoy yourselves. Thanks. We'll have a webinar for September announced in a few weeks. And take care, everyone. Olivier, thanks for a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye. And there we go.